moderates Green Light, Green Cards, a look at the immigration issue in Rhode Island. It's one of Rhode Island's most emotional debates. Community activists and state leaders square off. The WPRO debate series, Green Light, Green Cards, News Talk 630 WPRO.
And welcome, everyone. I am Tara Granahan from WPRO. Thank you so much for being here. This is an ongoing series of debates that we thought we would bring to you live on the stream, as we call it, so you can watch us, 630WPRO.com. And you'll be hearing a lot from our panel throughout the week on the WPRO Morning News with Jean Valicenti. We want to get some great conversation going here. As you just heard, Green Light for Green Cards. This is going to be an in-depth, pretty intense, I hope, conversation, debate, if you will. And these are the folks that we've been talking to over the years, really, about the immigration issue here in Rhode Island. And as we all know, it has become a huge national issue. And really, right now, the timing is just perfect because all across the country, so many different things are happening as far as immigration reform, and really how it affects our state is what we want to get to the nuts and bolts. So I don't have to say much today. Thankfully for you all. We're going to go right down the line. We were going to go in alphabetical order, but we're going to be pretty loose here. We want you to be yourselves as the panel. There are community leaders, state lawmakers, and we'll start here with Reverend Donald Anderson. We'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience, just a quick biography of yourself, and also, we'll give a quick bio and an opening statement, why you're here.
Sure. As you indicated, I'm Don Anderson. I am delighted to be here. Like Representative Palumbo, I graduated from Cranston West High School, except I was long gone when he graduated. So that's a whole different story. It's all that Cranston water I drank growing up. But I think the main reason that we're here, and we can get into this in more detail, but that the faith community, as most of us know, doesn't always agree. And we've seen issues here in our state where the faith community has had very different ideas. But here is a place where the faith community has really come together. Over the last decade, all different kinds of faith communities have made statements in favor of comprehensive immigration reform that includes a pathway to citizenship and really focuses on a bringing of the family together. And just recently in March, there was a poll of people, and they were asked their religious affiliation, and we found that an overwhelming majority of individuals in those denominations, which cover everywhere from Roman Catholic, Evangelical Protestant, Mainline Protestant, Mormons, Jews, you name it, there's a desire in this country to bring families together and to have comprehensive immigration reform that has a pathway to citizenship.
Mr. Bortz.
Thank you, Tara. I am a Rhode Island native. I proudly say a grandchild of 3 immigrants to the United States, product of Providence's public schools, and proudly a graduate of Classical High School. And I have been an immigration lawyer for over 20 years in the state of Rhode Island. I am an advocate for immigrants, I think, but more than that, I am an immigrant for sound public policy and a discussion of the real reasons why immigration reform makes sense to our economy and makes sense as a law and order issue. I think often the discussion of immigration reform and the undocumented 11 million in this country has lost sight of the real benefits that immigration has provided to this country during our history. We also sometimes lose sight of the history of anti-immigrant groups, starting back in the 1840s with the Know Nothing Party, the 1920s under President Harding, the Palmer Raids, incarceration of thousands of immigrants, and unfortunately, again, for some real valid reasons, a roundup of immigrants under President Bush, continuing for a while under President Obama as well. I think it is very important for us in looking at this issue to focus on what the economic impact may be for immigration now and in the future, and not lose sight of the fact that there are a number of countries in the world that have gone through issues of immigration and are facing it now. One of our great allies, Japan, is facing a horrible situation in which there are no young workers in their society. There are demographic issues which, if we look at fully and rationally by themselves, would convince any rational citizen, I believe, of this country that we absolutely need our 11 million undocumented, who are, of course, benefits to the society, who are not criminals, and that we absolutely have to have a rational policy going forward. I was a lawyer during the immigration reform under President Reagan in 1986. Good thing, but we're back again 30 years later with the same problem. So we got to fix it, we've got to get it right, and we have to understand the problem so we're not facing this over and over again, and look at what the benefits are to us as citizens, our economy, and the benefit to our law enforcement agencies of knowing who these 11 million undocumented people are. Thank you.
You can see we're going to have a lot to say today. Great opening. We're going to get going. They said rational citizens. Representative Peter Palumbo.
Exactly.
It's your opening.
Thank you, Tara. First, I'd like to thank you, Tara, and WPRO for having invited me to this forum. I think it's a great opportunity to express our views and to hopefully start to work together to find some solutions to the problems that we have. I too am an advocate for immigrants. We are a country of immigrants. I am the grandson of an immigrant. My grandfather came over here when he was 12 years old through Ellis Island, and had 6 kids. One was my mother, and so he had a prolific life. Actually, a lot of grandkids and whatnot. I want today, if nothing else, to clarify the differences between immigration and illegal aliens, because quite often it becomes blurred. People try to blur the two, and they're not analogous. There are people that come over, as my grandfather did. They come over to find work, to find a better place to live for their families. And they come over and they follow the process. They do the right thing. They follow the laws that were put into place and put into our Constitution by our forefathers. And that's what we need to see happen. We can't keep creating an environment that is inviting to the illegal aliens who come over here and from square one do not want to abide by the rules and the laws by coming here undocumented. So before I get too deeply into that, I think my 20 seconds are probably close to being up. I just want to thank you once again and look forward to the debate.
All right, Terry Gorman. Thank you, Representative Palumbo.
I'd like to thank WPRO and Tara also. Incredibly important issue, incredibly appropriate time. I'd also like to mention that I'm an advocate for immigrants and have been for a very long time. We started our organization, Rhode Islanders for Immigration Law Enforcement, 7 years ago because the government wasn't enforcing immigration laws. If at that time we could have prevailed and got the government to enforce all of the current immigration laws, we wouldn't be at the situation that we're in now. So I look forward to discussing that. I look forward to discussing some national issues, and I also look forward to discussing one thing that Mr. Bort said about, he mentioned it, and I think this is critical, that we welcome immigrants that are not criminals. And we're more than willing to do that, welcome immigrants that are not criminals. Illegal aliens are criminals. I'd also like to just mention, I'd be in trouble if I don't do this. I have a wife, 5 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons. So I intend to staying around here for a long time in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. And we have Mr. Roberto Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you, WPRO, and thank you, Tara. I'm very pleased to be here with this panel, and I know most of the people on this panel because I've had an opportunity in the past to speak with them, hear their views. One of the things that I hope that this panel will address today is some of the real issues that are behind the whole immigration debate, which a lot of times go on unspoken. And by that I mean that there's a certain segment in our population that is really opposed to immigration because they are afraid of what they see this country becoming, or what they think this country may become. They're afraid of the browning or the tanning of the population of this country. And I suggest that those are some of the motives that are driving some of these anti-immigrant groups, and some of the talk that you frequently hear, some of the code words that are frequently used, such as illegal immigrants.
Federal term.
We're not in the federal context, Terry, with all due respect, okay? So if you want to, go to federal court and talk in those terms, that's wonderful. But I'm still in my opening, and we can debate that later. But if you look at some of the groups that are behind the anti-immigrant movement, groups like FAIR, for example, FAIR has been, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, has been declared to be a white supremacist organization. Its leader, John Tanton, has issued warnings about, what happens if we allow too many immigrants to come into this country, and the fact that the whites are going to lose power, and this is no longer going to be a European-based cultural nation. So these groups feed a lot of information to my colleagues, some of my colleagues on this panel, and some of our senators like Jeff Sessions, who opposes immigration. And I have to remind you that when you look at some of their claims and some of the lies that they've spread about immigrants, upon further study, these claims have been proven to be false. For example, if we talk about the rising of crime levels in cities, well, it's been shown that crime has actually decreased in communities that have more immigrants. We talk about taking jobs, that's been proven. Recently, just this week, the CBO showed that this immigration bill that's presently before the Senate would actually reduce the deficit by almost $1 trillion in the next 10 years. So where is the value that immigrants are supposedly going to take from this country? It's not bearing out. And they certainly are not taking jobs. Other economists have shown that they're adding jobs to our economy. So there's a lot here that we should be discussing that really doesn't have to do with how high the wall should be built, but actually what's behind the anti-immigrant movement in this country.
All right, thank you so much for your introductions. And Mr. Gonzalez, you opened up a couple of doors. I can see the panel's getting antsy already, so we're going to get right to it. And we also have a great audience here, so if you have questions, I see some folks are actually taking notes. You can, by all means, raise your hand. We're going to squeeze you in, where we're going to have the panel discuss amongst themselves, and feel free to, as you just did, speak to each other. I will say, with all due respect to every panelist here, one of the most poignant stories I had to cover in 20 years was a situation with a young woman who didn't speak for quite some time, and I believe it was on the 4th of July we had her come to WPRO, and one-on-one I got to speak with her, and she was brutally attacked and raped, and it happened that her rapist and attacker was an illegal immigrant, and the whole tone to that, no matter what side of the argument is, was if he was not allowed in this state, she would not have lost a chunk of her life. She's not the same woman. So coming from the woman's standpoint, and having said that, Mr. Gonzalez, I'll start with you if you want to jump in there. What do you say to the people of Rhode Island who say, had Marco Reese not been in this state, he was working, he got fired, he was angry, he jumped in a car and took her, this would have never happened to her?
Yeah, the first thing you have to say is, look, immigrants are human beings, and there are good apples and bad apples in that group.
But he's an illegal immigrant, correct?
Well, again, whether or not he's undocumented, it doesn't make him necessarily a good person. There are plenty of people who have received their documents and have done everything correctly. And we don't have to go too far. Just go to Boston a few weeks ago, where we had a terrorist attack by a group of people who supposedly did everything correctly by the law. And they were here. Nobody was calling them illegal aliens. And they did something far worse than this person. So there's bad and good in every type of person. And immigrants are no different.
That doesn't answer the question. The question was, how do you feel about him being here illegally? He shouldn't have been in the country. That's why we have to have a means of screening and finding who these people are. because that woman wouldn't have been raped if, in fact, that person wasn't here in the state.
Excuse me,
that's all it
Representative,
is.
I need to cut in here because
Sure.
there's a real issue here. This particular situation is an incredibly tragic situation, and I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't feel horrible for that particular woman. But to take this particular case and suggest that that applies across the board.
No
to
one
all other
suggested that.
immigrants. Yes,
No
you
one
are.
suggest- no,
That's
not.
how you are using that, Peter.
Absolutely not.
And
You're
yes,
si-
you are.
you're
That
twisting
is
things.
what
I
is-
never said that.
That is what is, but that's how that's being used, and I hear people talking about that and say, let's get rid of all the immigrants because they're criminals and so forth. That was a
Well, the
bad
No one
seed.
wants to get rid of
That
immigrants.
was
You're blurring
a
it
bad
again. You're
seed,
blurring it.
and he's a problem, and we need to deal with that specific problem. But to bring that issue into the immigration debate, to suggest that somehow that's part of the issue, that is really, really wrong.
But what about, excuse me, but what about the 6-year-old boy that was just killed in a car accident by another illegal alien who isn't supposed to be in the country, who was supposed to be deported in 2009? We can't use that as part of the issue also? There are 2 illegal aliens who are responsible for heinous crimes.
There was no criminal charges brought, Terry.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah, you
the gentleman was
So please
deported.
be correct.
The gentleman was deported before anybody could do
There
anything.
were no criminal charges brought.
So
He
is
was
it just
driving the
bad
car.
timing? It could have been anyone, or is it? Are we reporting on it more? Are these incidents occurring more because there are more illegals here, or is it? Or are we just reporting on it more?
I'd like to suggest to you that you go to the police chiefs associations and some of these groups that have done crime studies in neighborhoods where there are high concentrations of undocumented immigrants, and you will see that some of these communities are the safest communities in the country. So to suggest that because someone is here in an undocumented status, that they are more likely to commit a crime, that is
No one
totally
suggested
bogus.
that.
No one
So
suggested
you,
that.
Well,
keep
that's-
twisting
that's-
things. That's not what we're saying, and that's not what we're just saying. The fact is, the person was here illegally, wouldn't have been behind that wheel if they weren't here.
And that's
what we're
why
saying.
I start my discussion by saying, you know, there's really code language that's being used. There's ulterior motives that are being implied
I
here,
disagree
and this is
vehemently
what we're
with that.
putting
Not
out
code.
on,
Vehemently,
you know,
I disagree with
on
you.
the radio stations and on talk shows across the country to try to demonize these
let's
immigrants
stick
who
with
are only
facts.
here trying to
Stick with
work.
facts.
Please, don't be F. Lee Bailey here.
When you use a
You know, this is-
when you use a broad brush to describe a class of people, you've started down the slippery slope. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they are people who you would call illegal, whether they are Jewish refugees who crossed from Russia into Germany like my great parents did. When you use a broad brush to describe a group, you have started way down to a slope that you will never recover from.
But why-
Mr.
why
Gordon,
is-
let me just
why
ask
is
you one
that
question.
divorce?
What's the broad brush? Is it the term illegal immigrant, or do you think we're targeting the Hispanic population?
I think when you call illegal, listen, I represent people from all across the world. They're Spanish, they're African, they're Asian. So when you say illegal, it's a code word. Illegal.
What is it
illegal.
code for?
Well, it's actually, and I can't tell you because I don't have that. I don't use that definition. I don't know what the code is. But
All right, who
I
has
wanted
the
to-
code, Terry?
No, I don't have the code.
I'll tell you what it
The federal
is.
government assesses people that are in the country illegally that have allegiance to another country as illegal aliens. There's no getting around that. You can't just say that it's a state issue or a federal issue. The federal government indicates that they're illegal aliens.
How
And
are they not?
I'd like to mention one thing when we're looking at all this, and I'm sorry if it's a class of people or whatever. I disagree vehemently with that. And Roberto, I disagree with you 5,000% that this is a racial issue perpetrated by people like Terry
You
Gorman.
disappoint
But
me, Terry.
go-
I thought it'd be 10,000%, but
Go to this website, remembranceproject.org. Remember that, remembranceproject.org. And that, they have a quilt. It was in Rhode Island last May, that they bring around and show in states all across the country. And it's pictures of people that were killed by illegal aliens all across the country.
You're making the point, Terry. Thank you.
so
How am I making my point?
so here's what it's called.
What?
The
Why is
term,
it code? What code is that? If there's 4,000 Americans were killed by illegal aliens, Why is that code? And
fact.
that could be from anywhere, like you said, Mr. Bort, from all over the world.
4,000, I'm sure in Nazi Germany, there were 4,000 Germans killed by 4,000 Jews.
Come on.
You're
But-
comparing,
because
you're
it's
comparing
statistics.
illegal
That's what
aliens
people
to-
do in life.
No one is saying
Take the
kill them.
statistics. You can see it. It happens in all communities. We have bad immigrants in this country. No question about it. We have bad citizens in this
Yep,
country.
I agree.
No question about it.
No one's saying that all illegal aliens are bad. They're not.
So
They were
here's what
wonderful illegal aliens. Let me just finish. They were wonderful illegal aliens, and I know why they come here. I spend a lot of time in Central America working with doctors that are friends of mine and dentists, and I've gone for the last 20 years, I've gone at least 15 years to help the people over in Nicaragua, taking care of the kids, working on their teeth, doing it for actually over 20 years. I've looked at the squalid conditions that they have in that country. If I were them, I would probably try to come over to America too, and I would try to get in here any way humanly possible.
Let's
They're
just,
good
let's just
people.
shift
They're
gears.
not bad people.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Let's talk about the education system. I remember years back, and it was a while back, so I'm sure things have changed. I don't know if it's gotten greater or lesser, but I recall a statistic. I was doing a story on the Providence school system and the difficulty with the graduation rates, et cetera. And I believe it was between 66 and 68 different languages were being spoken as far as the children in the Providence school system. Now, I personally cannot come up with 66 different languages off the top of my head, but it was dialects and variations on. And that the example for what this story was about was it was a very difficult learning environment. Can we agree with that, and how do we fix that? Obviously, the kids have to get an education, but who's speaking to them when the English teacher is a 30-year tenured Caucasian man? He's not speaking Hmong to these children.
Let me jump in on that a little bit. So that's an issue, okay? It's an issue, but it's a solvable issue. The problem is when you jump from that to the problems we're having in the schools. The problems we have in urban schools are not that we have young people who have some language issues. That's an issue that we've got to address. The problem is poverty, and that goes across the board. It's not just children who are here from immigrant parents. It's children from who are born here, folks whose parents were born here. And I think we've got to be very, very careful that we take this issue and suggest that the problems in our urban core schools are because of immigration. Are there some challenges? Sure. But the core issues in our urban schools are poverty and the evil of poverty, and we need to address that. If we can be addressing those issues, we'll be able to address these issues without any significant problem.
Tara,
Mike, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't disagree with Reverend Anderson about that, about poverty being a big issue. But when you look at the Providence school system and you mention that there are 63 official languages that are dealt with in the Providence school system, all of those children speaking all those different languages are required by law to be educated. Something has to be done. It can no longer be afforded. I don't want to get rid of any of those children in those schools, don't get me wrong, but we have to look at a different way to fund this unfunded mandate that requires that the school systems in the state of Rhode Island educate these children. And I have so much information on this, but just in Providence alone in 2010, there were over 4,000 English language learners in the Providence school system.
Meaning children that did not speak English.
Yes, English language learners in the Providence school system. In the Pawtucket school system, there were, I believe, something like 1,150. I might be off on that number. But from 5 years prior to that, that was an increase of 254 children that are non-English speaking children that have to be dealt with in the school system. And it's the law that they have to be dealt with, so we can't get around that. But somebody has to come up with a system where we go to President Obama and say, listen, the state of Rhode Island has a $40 million deficit. The school systems are costing us $286 million to educate the U.S.-born children of illegal aliens and illegal alien children. You have to kick in this money. we can no longer afford to do it. And I
So-
don't know
okay,
how that-
so I find it very
That's a federal
interesting.
mandate. That's the United States Supreme Court has said that. That's
Right.
not Rhode Island. That's the across
I
the
didn't
country.
say it was Rhode Island.
But
I
I'm
said
finding
it's
it-
a
So
federal
what you're
mandate.
requesting
But
is
I'm-
impossible.
I'm finding it very
Why?
interesting that you're assuming that because these kids are limited English speaking students, that they are here in an undocumented status.
I didn't say
well,
that.
I think that's the assumption here because you're
No, what?
using both terms interchangeably here.
No, I'm not.
Now,
I
a lot
said
of these
the
kids come here
US-born
perfectly
children
legal.
of
Wait
Ill-
a minute. You had your chance. Let me speak now, okay?
No going Trillo. That's going to be the new verb.
So,
We got to keep it below a
So-
Trillo so we don't get asked to leave.
So I was on the school board in Providence for 12 years, and many of the students who were limited English-speaking students in our school system were in fact here legally. They were recent arrivals who did everything as you like correctly and immigrated to this country. Many were from Puerto Rico. Those are U.S. citizens by birth. So they were here and unable to speak English. So let's not equate the two things, okay? And furthermore, while I was on the school board, I had an opportunity to speak to many teachers that had these students, and they very much enjoyed having them, and they thought they added tremendously to their classroom and to the experience of the other students. I, for one, would not want to go to a college, a university, or a school where everybody looked like me, sounded like me, and did everything like me. I welcome that diversity. You don't.
No, that's not true.
That's just
not
unbelievable.
true.
See,
And
see,
what
Mr.
I
Gonzalez,
said
you-
was,
you-
just
you
let
never-
me-
go ahead.
what I said was the illegal alien children and the U.S.-born children of illegal aliens is the term that I used.
Why
So-
put them together?
Because that's the total number that you would come up with that were non-English speaking
And
students.
actually, those numbers are incorrect based upon the Department of Homeland Security estimates of numbers in the state of Rhode Island. I'm sure you know that, don't you?
My numbers are from the Providence School Department.
The numbers are from, so they are keeping track of illegal immigrants in this Providence School Department. That's not true.
I didn't say they were keeping track of
So how
illegal
would you know?
immigrants. I said they were keeping track of non-English speaking students.
Is it
what I
is it
said.
not, Mr. Let's reintroduce everyone because we're halfway through. Reverend Donald Anderson, we have Attorney David Bortz, Representative Peter Palumbo, Terry Gorman from Ryle, and Attorney Roberto Gonzalez. Mr. Bortz, when you just mentioned that, are they not allowed to keep track of who's here legally or illegally?
No, they are not under our state laws or federal laws to ask that question. However, I can tell you that the Department of Homeland Security and the United States Census Bureau do have numbers estimating the number of foreign-born people in our state, as well as the number of foreign-born children who are in our school systems. Current estimates from the last census were that in Rhode Island there were perhaps 1,500 to 1,800 children in that category.
But
Are you disagreeing, Terry?
if there are only that many children in that category, then how do we have over 7,700 non-English speaking students in our schools that require
But-
English language learning programs?
By the way, more outrageous than that is the fact that we have teachers in the Providence school system that do not speak English. Is that incredible?
Yeah.
I know of none, but
Representative, where are you getting that from?
I got it from the teachers union.
Who?
I'm not going to say because I
Okay,
don't.
so
Well,
it's a
See,
rumor.
listen,
Okay.
no, it's
Here's
not
the
a rumor.
problem.
No,
It's
it's
a
not
rumor.
I'll get the.
Un-
I'll tell you what. I'll get the Tara. I will get you that information. It's so
Right.
funny, but
Please do.
everything you've said, both on the opposing side of this, has been non-factual.
I'm
So
giving you
now you're
facts.
checking me,
I'm reading
and
you
that,
the
I think
facts.
that's a riot. No, but Mr. Gonzalez saying that people don't. There are groups out here that are white supremacists. They don't want. They're arguing the fact that people shouldn't come over here legally because they don't like the browning of America. That's just all nonsense. That's all nonsense.
Representative,
That's all in a
today,
blur.
this morning at Burnside Park, we had a rally for comprehensive immigration, and a gentleman stood there with a homemade sign and said that this was a white supremacist standing there saying that the whites were becoming a minority and we shouldn't let these immigrants in.
Yeah,
so
there's
it's
lunatics out
right
there.
here
What group was he
in
with?
Rhode Island.
Yeah, but what group?
I don't
You
know.
were
I
saying the
saw
group.
the sign
Yeah,
today.
there's lunatics
Channel
out
10.
there.
He'll be
They're
on
out there.
Channel 10 and Channel 12 today. All I'm saying is it's here.
Oh,
And
it's
it may
here,
not
but
be
don't-
you. It
Right.
may not be you. But
But-
there are a lot of people, and I talk to, believe me, I talk to a lot of people in congregations, and they are They're afraid. Why? Because America's changing, and they're afraid of change. And people take advantage of that fear. What we need to do is relieve people's fears and help them to understand that no matter what your skin, inside, your heart beats the same way. And the reality is, in our military service, we have young men and women who are not citizens of this country, but who are part of our military forces, who care about America and who care about what this country is all about. My grandfather immigrated here. He hardly got off the boat, and they put him on another boat and sent him back to France as a doughboy. And that's happened with all of our immigrants. And so I think we need to be careful. And I'm not suggesting that you have racist tendencies at all, or that Terry does.
And it wasn't your statement anyway,
but for you to deny that within the anti-immigration movement there are no racist tendencies is to totally
Well, the groups I
miss
know
the
of, I've
point.
never heard of, and I've worked with Riley, I've never heard of any.
Well,
So,
believe me,
Reverend
it's
Anderson,
around.
But you also
It
get
is
your
around.
information from FAIR, and FAIR has been classified as a nativist, anti-immigrant organization.
Tell everybody,
facts to back
tell
that up.
everybody who classifies them as that.
Well, the Southern Poverty
The
Center,
Southern
who has
Poverty-
been following these
the Southern
groups.
Poverty Law Center, who, if I said I didn't like Roberto because he was Hispanic, Ryle would become a hate group in 10 seconds.
Then why don't you tell us about John Tenton and tell us about his beliefs and how he's the founder and the leader of this group, and they produce the information that you and the rep here use to talk about immigrants, to create these myths.
not about immigrants,
that they're-
illegal
they're
aliens.
stealing
Illegal
I'm going to
our
correct you.
jobs,
Every
they-
time you blur that, I'm going to correct you.
Illegal aliens. We're talking about. I'm not going to talk about
Here we go
John
again with the
Stanton.
code word, illegal aliens.
Illegal
Yeah,
aliens.
code
It's
word.
definite.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
illegal
it's-
and they're
it's-
aliens.
Yeah, they're extra ancestral beings, and they're
Jan-
illegal.
No,
that meaning that they're
no,
criminals.
No,
I
you
already-
sound as ridiculous
already
as the issue.
clarified that.
He's making me lose my train of thought. He wants to answer about John Tanton, the founder of FAIR. All John Tanton is guilty of doing is saying that he thinks we have too much immigration. He would like to see immigration lowered. At the same
No,
time,
he says
as
a
he's
lot
being,
more, and
as
I
he's
got
being
some citations
criticized-
here.
As he's being criticized for that, the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, had the same thoughts as John Tanton did way back in those days. Why don't we make a comparison to those two people? Look those two names up, John Tanton, Tanton, and Margaret Sanger, Sanger, and see what you come up with. And see who you think is the worst one. One founded Planned Parenthood, and the other one founded FAIR.
I want to get to thank you. I don't mean to cut you off, Terry, but I want to just get back to another Rhode Island topic. Just I'm only here to represent WPRO and hopefully some voices out in the community. I have heard people say, I can go to Rhode Island Hospital's emergency room and I have to produce my insurance card. I'm afraid I won't get treated if I don't have insurance. And yet there are undocumented citizens who they have to treat. How is this affecting our healthcare system and the cost to the rest of those tax-paying people here in Rhode Island?
It's a huge burden.
Listen, it's absolutely true that the emergency room is our bastion of last defense for anybody who doesn't have insurance. This is a whole nother issue as well, which is regarding the ACA and the passage of universal health care in this country. So as long as we have people in this country who do not have health insurance, we all know that. Everybody here in this room, I'm sure, has been a patient. You know, when you're really sick, you know what you're going to do. You're going to call your doctor. You can't get there. You go to the hospital. The hospitals are required by law to treat people if there's an emergency. People come in from around the world, and that happens. It's not necessarily saying that it's right, but we have it. We have to deal with it. The hospitals are not going to turn the patients down. So the real question, and listen, we're looking retrospective here. I haven't heard any talk about the future. All right, heard no talk about the future. It's all about them or that or what or criminals. This is not what we're talking about. The question is, what's the future of our country? All right, let's talk about the future. Let's move forward. Where are we going? All right, so if you're going to throw out 11 million people, I say to the people who call them illegal aliens, and by the way, these so-called illegal aliens have not been given rights as criminals in the United States by the United States Supreme Court, who has found that they are not entitled to legal counsel at all because deportation is not a criminal offense. So you can call them illegal, you can call them what you want. They're here. They are producing economic benefits in our country. They have children here. Most of them now have been here more than 10 years, which actually might qualify many of them for residence under our court procedures through cancellation of removal. Whole nother issue, but it will back up our court system for 20 years to put them all through it. But what we've got to think about is going forward, how do we take care of this issue? How do we get people together and stop pointing fingers so that we've got 11 million guests here. Probably 5% of them are bad eggs. Let's find them, let's get them home.
Let's-
The 95% of them, let's do what we can. We are Americans. We are people of compassion. We are well known in this world as humanitarians. What are we doing here? I mean, I've got to admit, what are we doing? Are we going to give up our reputation in this world? What did FDR say about fear? I mean, there are a few people here, I don't remember it, but, what do you got to fear here? Fear itself. Well, what are we afraid of? Let's move on and show the world what we are capable of. We got 11 million guests here.
In terms of future,
But
let
can
me
we
just jump
afford
in.
that? I
we're a
think that's
country
the
of
question.
laws.
Let me jump in on
not
that.
afford.
Let me jump in on that specific issue and quote one of the leading liberal thinkers in America, and that is former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Okay, he's not exactly what we would consider out there on the fringes of liberal America. Jeb Bush said just a few weeks ago in Detroit that there are many reasons why we should pass comprehensive immigration, but for him, the greatest was economic progress. He said that the only way we can move forward in this country is to welcome these folks in and provide a way for them to contribute to our economy. And that is part of the further looking forward. And that's to all of our benefit, not just to these folks who are here without documentation, but for all of us. We need these people. And no less than, a person who's got a pretty good reputation within his party is suggesting that this is an economic reason. That's his primary reason for supporting it.
Let me just
And
quickly
Tara, I
say,
suggest to you
Open that
that,
door.
that
I'd
we
like to
cannot
talk.
afford to turn these people away at the emergency rooms. I mean, what would happen if there was an outbreak of some disease or some epidemic because we didn't catch it early and treat it?
That's right. And that's what happens when the illegals come over. They
So
don't get processed
if
properly,
you
and
follow
they
that
bring
theory
over
to the end, why is it that every time I talk, I hear 10 noise? I always stay quiet when the rest of the panel is
we
talking.
don't get a chance
I don't
to
know
speak
what's
because
going
we're
on
outnumbered here,
They
but
don't-
that's okay.
They want
Go
to
ahead.
drown me out. But can I just make my point here?
go ahead.
If you follow the suggestions here, that we don't educate them, that we don't provide them with medical care,
Where
that
are
we
those
don't.
suggestions coming from?
Who said that?
You're
Well-
making it up as you go along, Roberto.
Well, Terry, if I heard you right, you were talking about these kids. Being in
I
our
said we
school
can't not
system.
educate them because it's the
Okay.
law. We have to educate them. That's
Oh,
what I
but
said.
yeah, but if the law wasn't in place, if we could only change the law,
I didn't
say
change the
okay.
law. I said find a way to
All
fund
right,
it.
but here's my point. If we don't provide these services, if we don't provide police protection, fire protection, if my neighbor's house doesn't get a fire truck in front of it when it's burning because he's undocumented, my house is in jeopardy.
Who said that?
If my kids are going to
Wait.
school, with some undocumented kid who hasn't received his vaccines or something like that, which, by the way, doesn't happen because the first thing they do is they vaccinate the kids before they put them into the school system. But still, it's a harm to our society as a whole. So this is really foolish to think that if we stop these services, they're just going to pack up and they're going to go away. It's not going to happen.
Tara, can I just mention something about
Yes.
going forward?
Yes,
See this package I have in front of me
you're
here?
a prop, yes.
That's Bill S-744. That's how big it is. 1,170 pages of regulations about comprehensive immigration reform. I thought we were going to talk more about that today, but I have a form here. If Tara would indulge me, I would just like to. What I did, there's 40 different reasons to vote against this.
All right, I don't know if we have time for all
No.
40, but we're going
I
to let you
boi-
hit your top two.
I boiled,
Top two.
I boiled it down to 20.
Okay.
And then I put all stars next to them. But the first 4-star one that I have is border security. That has to be the first thing that we do, is secure the borders. We
That's
just
the first
had an
50 pages of the proposed law, by the way.
Yeah, it is. I know. First 120
They're
pages.
going to double the number
They're
of.
going to put 20,000 new border patrol agents.
They're
They're going to
gonna
put drones.
700 more
They're going to put
miles
700
of
more
fence.
miles of fence. Terrific. How much have they done so far? Bupkis, 0.
That's
Look
not
forward,
And
please.
what's her name? Janet Napolitano says this is all going to happen. we're going to have, no, right now she says that the border is more secure than it's ever been. In the bill, total discretion on how much fence is built, how many new employees are hired, the whole 9 yards is totally up to Janet Napolitano. Look at her performance so far. Do you trust that?
Or her successor, right? Because
Or
she's
his
not there
successor.
forever.
A couple of other things I've just off the top of my head. That an illegal alien can commit document fraud, Social Security fraud, whatever, and still get into the system for legalization. Once they come into the system for legalization, if a federal employee, and I have the page numbers and the section of it and all that, a federal employee told somebody about that illegal alien that had committed Social Security fraud, the federal employee is subject to a $10,000 fine and time in jail. The federal employee. An illegal alien that's turned down for legalization, and I'm not pointing any fingers here, turned down for legalization, can sue the federal government. Sue. And the federal government provides the attorneys at taxpayer expense. Like I said, I'm not pointing any fingers
on
here.
that, Terry, please.
We're going to have to politically
This
check
is
that.
pretty technical.
Please,
I wanted to go
please.
back, and Terry's got a lot of information, and we appreciate that. And we can talk about the federal situation as well. But I wanted to get back to Rhode Island, and I wanted to ask Representative Palumbo, because you have to go back to what we now know is the wild, wild west of the budget wrangling up there. And it's been quite an interesting day or two. Why can't we take, well, you go, let's go back to the healthcare situation. How are we affording this, Representative Palumbo? What are you seeing with the numbers, and how is it affecting the economy in Rhode Island with just the illegal status?
Well, last night we voted to make a payment for the non-reimbursable health care.
Which is
people
what?
that can't afford it. The people that can't afford to pay, they came for whatever, to have some work done, and the hospitals owe this money. So the number was $128 million. That's how much the hospitals have spent on the non-reimbursable care. So are they all illegal aliens? Of course they're not. And I don't even know the percentage, but we know the percentage is there. So it has to put a strain on the system because they can't go anywhere else to get it. So do we need reform? I support the reform. We have to do it. But as Terry said, let's stop the bleeding first. We have to stop the bleeding. If we don't stop the bleeding, then we're going to have the same situation that happened in 1986 when Reagan was here.
But hasn't the bleeding stopped?
No, it has
I mean,
not.
hasn't the numbers
give
of
you-
people crossing the border
Well,
illegally,
I
hasn't
don't-
that been
Certainly
now?
not. Not that I know of. I don't know. I don't assume it is because
All
all
the
it shows
figures
is
that
the
I see
border. Let me
say
just
that
read
they-
this. Let me just finish, please. Here's a number that to me is staggering because this gets back to the Jeb Bush thing in Florida. I don't know how it helps the economy in Florida, having illegal aliens, but in Rhode Island, we have almost an 8% unemployment rate. And Dorcas International stated, according to the Pew Hispanic Institute, that there are 20,000 illegal aliens working in Rhode Island. Now, those jobs could be going to people that are here in the process, the immigrants that are here in the process, that are looking for work, that should be afforded these jobs. So it puts a strain on our economy.
Here's the fallacy in that argument, okay? There's about 10 bodegas on Broad Street that are owned and operated by undocumented folks. And they give jobs to about 10 other U.S. citizen or permanent residents. So if they were to go and close their shop, 10 jobs would go with each one of those. And that's what you're not figuring. This isn't a zero-sum equation here. There is a net benefit by having a certain percentage of the population here taking these jobs. And furthermore, you know, they're both of my friends here are big proponents of E-Verify. And the fact of the matter is that we don't have a lot of these jobs that the undocumented people are taking are not the types of jobs that would be picked up by E-Verify. They're cutting our lawns. They're working as domestics. They're cleaning homes. They're doing all these jobs. There's
They
no
wouldn't
way
be
that
picked up by E-Verify
So-
because we don't mandate that they have to do it. That's why it's not being picked up by E-Verify.
Well, and I suggest to you
and
that
let me
there's
do, and
no
let me
way
do
other
the, let me
than,
do the flip side of that. I let you sit there and I listened to what you were saying, but let me do the flip side. You have two different companies. This just happened in Rhode Island a few years back. You have two companies in Rhode Island. You have an unscrupulous. This is unfair to the. You want to talk about humanizing this? The illegals come over here. They're nervous. They're worried that they're going to get caught. So they have these unscrupulous business owners that use them almost as a form of slavery. They pay them wages that are less than what the minimum wage is. These guys get to bid on RFPs, and they respond at a lower level because they're not following the rules. So these unscrupulous business owners who are employing these people win contracts so unfairly to the person who may be using E-Verify or hires people that are citizens in the country, and there was a company that got caught a few years back he was in the cleaning company, and they were cleaning the courthouses, and they were using illegal aliens. So it's not fair to the people that are trying to do it the right way. That's what I'm saying.
I want to go right down the panel here. Just real briefly, a yes or a no, and maybe 10 seconds on why you're going to say yes or no. Should undocumented Rhode Island citizens get a driver's license?
Absolutely. They're here. Look, these people are here to stay. They're going nowhere. We need to make sure that they understand how to drive cars. They need to be insured for the safety and for the welfare of all Rhode Islanders.
I agree with those reasons, and I'd like to add the other side to it is, if somebody on the road breaks a law, we need to know where they live, and we need to be able to find them. And that's the law and order argument in favor of giving everybody a license.
A negative. I disagree with that. I think it's just another incentive for illegals to come to Rhode Island. I think we should give law enforcement the ability to ask for some form of identification when they stop a car and they don't have any identification on them. They should be allowed to check the background of these people, and by affording them driver's license, it's just another little chit for them.
A vehement no, and I agree with Peter. It definitely is another big incentive for people to come to Rhode Island. We have so many incentives now for illegal aliens to come to Rhode Island. I mean, we can have illegal alien babies, we can have illegal alien children in our schools, we can have illegals getting welfare, or we get illegals getting in-state tuition. It just goes on and on and on. And it's a farce to think that if we said illegal aliens could have driver's licenses, that all the illegal aliens in Rhode Island would be lined up in Cranston at the Registry of Motor Vehicles saying, "Hi, I'm here, I'm an illegal alien, and I want a driver's license." That wouldn't happen, and what happens is just like, and I know Roberto will bring up Americans do the same thing, but what these people would do, they're required to have insurance. And what the scam is that all of these people are perpetrating now, Americans and illegal aliens alike, is they go down and register for auto insurance. They get the auto insurance. They pay the first month's premium. They get their insurance card, and nobody ever sees them again. And they're able to use their insurance card for a full year. So to think that illegal aliens are all of a sudden going to come out of the woodwork and be these honest, upstanding citizens and say, yes, I'd like to have a driver's license.
That's our legislature's fault about that comment about 1 month. No offense, Mr. Blanco.
That's okay.
So
No offense taken, but
I
they'll
mean-
also be able to vote because if you get it, we have a voter ID law. And once they get a license and they have a residence, they're going to be able to vote. So that's another skill.
That is absolutely not true. The
absolutely
federal motor
is.
voter law,
Absolutely
have you
is.
read the
This is
federal
the-
motor voter law? That's incorrect. That's incorrect.
And
This
let
is the
Mr.
kind of
Gonzalez have his
derogatory information that is, spewed about undocumented. That
I think
is
you have a
created. The only purpose is to create fear and hate. All right. So here's
Roberto,
my
I
position.
think you've developed a complex in
Here's
the
my
last 5
position.
years.
Terry, you had your 10 minutes almost of answering a 10-second question. So let me answer it. We should have driver's licenses for undocumented because, number one, it's a public safety issue. We need to know that these people know how to drive, they know how to read our signs, that they've been tested, and that they're good to go. Secondly, we want them to be insured. If I'm on the road and I get hit by someone, I want to know that they're insured. And if they're not insured because of some, hole in the law, then that needs to be taken care of.
Well, just because you have a license, though, doesn't mean you have insurance.
that
And there's
is
a lot
true.
of
That's
documented
true. I
citizens
reckon-
driving around without insurance.
I understand that. But also, I just want to put aside this whole notion that we're going to become a magnet all of a sudden for undocumented to come from all over the country because we are providing driver's license. The state of Washington, the state of Utah, the state of New Mexico, I think lastly, Colorado and Indiana have authorized licenses for undocumented people, and they're not reporting any floods of migrants going over there to get their driver's licenses. So I think that's a fallacy, and unless you get some facts and some studies that show it's otherwise, I think you should stop saying it.
All right, we're going to go back down now because you had to go first on the bullet round here. We'll start with Mr. Gonzalez. You mentioned the possibility, well, there obviously has to be some element of voter fraud, whether or not we're talking about immigration situation. Do you feel that some politicians target the immigrant community, sway them to vote, and is there such a thing as voter fraud within the immigrant community?
There is none that I'm aware of. I know that there has been reports of people anecdotally saying that they've seen people who they thought were undocumented voting, but no one has ever been charged with voting when they weren't supposed to. The last case of voter fraud that I've seen in the state of Rhode Island was when this gentleman was voting in East Providence out of a business address when he was living in Situate. And other than that, I have not seen now one single case of voter fraud in the state of Rhode Island. I may be incorrect, but that's what I know.
The story about Anastasia Williams and someone voting on her behalf?
Again, anecdotal, nothing concrete.
Well,
Terry?
I've been in several different instances where people have witnessed voter ID fraud, and nothing is done about it, Roberto. That's the problem. People bring these things to the Rhode Island Board of Elections as abuses, which they're supposed to bring voter fraud to for years and years and years, and nothing has happened. I was there, my first experience with the Board of Elections. Anecdotally, there were 3 newly legalized U.S. citizens, a girl named Laura and a couple named Azevedo. They were there to complain about voter fraud in their district. Laura said numerous people had voted in her district that she was aware were illegal aliens. The Azevedos said that someone tampered with 700 voter registrations in order to get voter fraud perpetrated. That was their first experience with the U.S. government. So would that be something that they wanted to just bring out anecdotally? They were there pouring their hearts out to the Board of Elections. I have to tell you that they were asked, would they tell their stories to the state police? I went out in the hall, spoke with them. They said yes, they would. That, as far as I know, the Board of Elections turned that over to the state police. It's never been heard from since.
So now the police are dropping their ball. Is that
never
what they're
been
saying?
heard from since. I'm saying the Board of Elections said that they turned it over
I wish
to the
O'Donnell
state
was
police.
on this board because I'd like to see
I
you
didn't-
tell him that right to his
said,
face because
Roberto,
I doubt
why do you
that.
keep skewing everything? I said that the Board of Elections said that they turned it over to the state police. I didn't say the state police got it.
Well,
I said the Board of Elections said they did it. And I prefaced that by saying the Board of Elections for years has refused to do anything about voter fraud that's been brought to their attention.
All right, Marriott, respond to it's voter fraud. I believe it's not just in the illegal immigrant community, Latino group. It's everywhere. I had it. I've experienced it in Cranston, in my district. So, is it out there? Yeah. It's not just one group. It's not just one certain group. It's right across the board. So, I don't think it's any more prevalent than anywhere else, but it probably does exist. So it's not just one. I think it's rampant throughout the state, personally. That's my personal opinion, because it's happened.
I'm going to say that nobody here has spoken of anything that's actually been reported to any official agency. I've never seen any. No one here has either. So really, we're talking rumors.
Yes,
I think our conversation would be better served talking about facts.
Yeah, let me just say this. As far as I know, I'm the only person on the board who's ever served as a precinct warden. I've done that a number of times, and I know the system here in Rhode Island, and no system is foolproof. But I need to tell you that I am highly skeptical of terms like rampant throughout the system. We don't have a perfect system, but we've got a decent system of checking on people, and I personally witnessed that election after election. This is a solution that craves a problem. We solve something that doesn't exist. We have plenty of problems in Rhode Island, and instead of dealing with real problems, we dealt with this phantom problem. And the last thing I would say is, if there is a problem, it has nothing to do with undocumented people. It has to do with our election system.
No,
It
I
has to
agree
do
with you on that. We can agree on that.
Mixing it in this debate is just a red herring.
I can actually agree with you on that. I think we still should put voter ID in, not because of the illegals, because right across the board it could help, and it happens in my district. So, and you know, you're correct. I said rampant. That wasn't what I meant. I meant it's across the board. It's throughout the state. So.
We all mentioned, let's stop looking back, let's look forward. The state of Rhode Island is not exactly at the top of many lists unless they're poorest performing lists. So how do we move forward? What's the number one thing that this state government has to do, whether it's the governor, whether it's the legislature, whether it's those people fighting over the budget as we speak? Well, we'll start in the middle this time. Representative Palumbo.
You know, for the I don't know how many years I've been working on this issue. They said it's a federal thing. The feds should be working on this. And I said, you know what? It is a federal issue. The feds should. So I'm hoping that they actually do something and they work on this problem, because the only reason we're picking the ball up here is because they haven't done anything. They've been sitting on their hands. So I'm looking forward to see what the federal government does. And because right now, at this point, it's really not going to fly in the State House. The General Assembly, we're almost out of session, so this year is it's a dead issue this year. So
See, we're here talking about immigration issues, though, and to say that it's out of our hands is almost a defeatist situation.
Have you been up the State House lately when I put that
No.
No, it's we can do something about it. We don't have the support, and that's the problem. We don't have the support up there. I mean, we're going backwards in this state. I mean, now we have in-state tuition for illegal aliens. Now, I know a girl. She has a 3.8 average. She's trying to get into URI, and she can't get in because there's not a spot. She's doing for a graduate program, and she can't get in. She just got kicked back. And so, things like that. And how can you the in-state tuition? How can you charge almost double the cost of an in-state tuition rate for someone who lives in Massachusetts or Connecticut and allow people that came into the country illegally in-state tuition?
Now,
So
this is a whole other theme. If we can briefly have Reverend Anderson, you just shook your head. Just weigh in on that. That doesn't sound fair. Is he telling the
first of all, here's the deal. This young lady didn't get into a graduate program. What does that have to do with in-state tuition? It has nothing to do with that.
Because there are only so
and
many.
For you to bring that up in the midst of this conversation, there may be issues.
One of the issues that we have to deal with.
That is not the point. If that girl didn't get in, there's another issue. It has nothing to do with in-state tuition. And in-state tuition is one of the best economic incentives that we can do here. Let's get these people educated.
How is it fair, though?
So that they can help us.
Let me ask you,
There's
how is it
nothing-
fair to someone from Connecticut or Massachusetts that they have
Look,
to pay double?
in-state tuition is the way you're talking about is unfair to somebody. The concept of in-state tuition is unfair to Connecticut and Massachusetts if you want to look at it that way. The fact of the matter is every state, for their state institutions, gives a favorable rate to people who have graduated from their school system.
But I'm saying for
And
people
so
that are
we
in this
have
country
people-
illegally, they're
It's
not
good
even
for-
in this supposed to be in this country.
It's good for our economy. We
It's
want them to
exactly
stay
right.
here.
It's
But why should
self-defeating.
you?
It
How is that fair to
self-defeating.
these people? I just don't, on a fairness
Boy, I hate
level,
to
I
wrap
don't
it
know
up
how
here.
you can do that.
I really do. I know some folks have to get back up to the State House. It's a busy time. We so appreciate your time. Reverend Donald Anderson, David Bortz, Roberto Gonzalez, Terry Gorman, and Representative Peter Palumbo. This was fantastic. Green light on green cards. You'll be able to find all of this information. Watch it again. Folks, weigh in on our Facebook page. And, of course, you can find it all 630WPRO.com. I'm Tara Granahan, and thank you for being here. We sure appreciate it. Thank you. You got you all riled up?
That's all right. I love it.
No, that was great. Thank you very much.